making our point of Civil Discourse Initiative. This is our first forum that we're running, and I'll give you a little bit of background. My name is Cirmo. I'm the Dean of the College of Letters and Science. My partner in crime is Dr. Dona Warren. She's the Assistant Dean and Professor of Philosophy. First of all, thank you for joining us. Great to have you here tonight. And something that we're actually kind of terrified by because we don't quite know how it's going to work out, but we think you're going to be able to help us with that. First, I want to give some special thanks to some people that helped make this possible. Mark Williams, in the back of the room. Mark is my advancement person. And his intern is Sydney Inks. They helped out setting things up, and she's going to be taking pictures tonight, so don't look behind you. Mark Gladfelder. Mark is, I think he's here. There's Mark down in front. He's from COFAC, and he helped us with setting up the slides and the lighting in the room here. Mary Milkey of Information Technology. I don't think Mary's here, but she has her clicker gals are here, and they're lined up in the back there. Haley, Kira, and Sarah. They're in the back. Thank you again for your help. Michael Martin for helping us set up the video taping, and this will be on the college website. If you want to encourage your students to look at this, view it, have some comments, bring them to class, that would be great. And finally, I want to thank Jeff Moore, the Dean of the College of Fine Arts and Communication, for letting us use this really wonderful room. We need to get one of these in the College of Letters. Anyway, having said all of that, you received a little clicker. And it's not a remote control, all right? There's no need to point it at the screen, which you see people doing every now and then, but basically that clicker is for some information collection that we will have at the end of the forum. And we're going to ask you some questions, and as an audience, you'll all be able to answer those questions using those clickers, and we'll give you some instruction on those. Just do not hit the red button, please. Yeah, it's an inside joke. Find the red button, let me know, and give me that. Whatever you do, don't hit that red button. Okay. So, having said that, we want to take this opportunity to thank the following groups. The AAC&U is where we got our initial money for this forum, the American Association of Colleges and Universities. I'd like also to thank the Academy of Letters and Science, the Office of Academic Affairs, the Faculty Senate, who endorsed this initiative, of which this is the first event. Also, the Classified Staff Advisory Council, otherwise known as CSAC, and Student Government Association. And I want to thank also, specifically, Terry Rothman and the Community Foundation of Central Wisconsin. Terry, are you here tonight? Terry helped us start getting this idea some real traction when we talked to him about his Speak Your Piece Civility Initiative, which is an initiative which is being done in the community, and it's a much broader based initiative. We decided to focus and hone down on civil discourse. My partner in crime here, Dr. Warren, is a philosopher. I think she's a philosopher of the first order. She's a State Regents Award winner, teacher, and she helps me put things into perspective when I speak. I sometimes think that the words she's using are words that I need to look up, and often she uses words like epistemology. And to me, that means, it's a doctor at Marshfield that works on urinary tract infections. But having said that, she has straightened me out a lot on the philosophy side, and I helped her see the pragmatic side of things because I'm a geoscientist and an environmental engineer. And so we really do balance in some ways, and we have some pretty spirited arguments about just what we mean by civil discourse. So, having said that, I'd like to hand it off to Dona.
Okay, thanks. I would just like to also thank all of you for showing up. Really appreciate it. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I thought the acoustics are pretty good. I don't want to be straddling back there when I'm talking about the screen. Just a little bit of background, where this came from. I don't know how many of you have heard of this, probably not very many, but there was a Harvard pledge in September of 2011. It was called the Freshman Pledge. I guess it was the class of 2015 pledge at that time. It became vilified as the kindness pledge and civility pledge. And part of this was due to its implementation, which really was fundamentally misguided, I think. What happened was the monitors, the door monitors in the halls would go from door to door, they would present this pledge, they would invite students to sign, and then they were going to hang this pledge in the entryways, which many critics of the pledge thought was sort of some kind of strong-arm tactic almost. It was a bit coercive. So there were criticisms on that score, and I think those criticisms were quite well placed. But there were also, I think, more philosophically interesting criticisms of the content. The pledge itself is very short, 119 words only. This is just a section of it. But the parts of this pledge that got most attention were references to civility and enjoining students to make Harvard a place where the exercise of kindness holds a place on par with intellectual attainment, oh, horror of horrors. On the web then, blog posts with titles like Harvard, where civility trumps free speech, and does Harvard want gold fingers or good little boys and girls? And Harvard pledge values kindness over learning. And as a philosopher who's always been sort of interested in the relationships between the intellectual virtues and the more traditional moral virtues, and the relationship between being a clear thinker and a kind-hearted person, I found these kinds of criticisms, which largely went unchallenged in their underlying assumption, that there was a fundamental disconnect between being very, very smart and also being very, very similar. And I thought that this was an interesting mistake, particularly in light of the fact that nobody knows everything, and often there's sort of a division of labor in the academic context. We all need to communicate our results to each other. A certain healthy adversarial nature is not bad, but I thought that these kinds of concerns were seriously overblown.
Yep. So having said all of that, our interest was basically guided towards this idea of civil discourse as potentially being an essential learning outcome of the Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science. Why not? Can't we come up with ways that our professors and our students relate to each other that demonstrates the kind of civil discourse that we think they should take to the public? And so I read an early paper of Dr. Warren's where she makes this statement, which I can't help but cringe at, and that is, after many controversial conversations, folks simply say, well, we will agree to disagree. And there's something philosophically deeply wrong with that statement. She can tell you a hell of a lot more about that than I can. But having said that, it sort of grates on my nerves. So we decided to focus our efforts specifically on the civil discourse side of civility. And we're aiming basically at making this a practice for all of our students. And the more faculty and students we can get involved in this, the better. We applied to AAC&U. We got a small grant for a seminar. You're at the seminar tonight. We've done a few other things as well. We presented a paper in Madison in spring called Civil Discourse and Civility as an Essential Learning Outcome, LEAP 2.0. That was a critical conference because representatives of AAC&U were there, and they saw this, and they got excited about it, and we might be invited to a national convention to, in fact, present this idea as an essential learning outcome. We then gave a paper at Loyola Marymount University, I think it was in June, wasn't it, Donna? And that was a little more on the philosophy side. I was definitely outnumbered in that one. I had no idea what anyone was talking about. It was a philosophy conference. So, climate change I can deal with, philosophy, forget it. Anyway, we also then got a charge from the Chancellor to bring forth this civil discourse civility idea as part of our strategic plan. And that's basically what we're doing here tonight.
One of the first things that we wanted to do was to come to some sort of working understanding of what we meant by civil discourse, partly in order to avoid the mistake that I think Harvard made in not defining the term and leaving the door wide open to misunderstandings of what they were probably getting at. Philosophers do sometimes succumb to death by definition, where we just worry a term and never really go much further than that, at least some kinds of philosophers do. So this definition of civil discourse is sort of cobbled together from the literature. It's intended as a working definition, working in both senses. It's open to revision, it's highly diffeasible, and it's also expected to actually generate some movement. It's supposed to help us decide what counts as civil discourse and what doesn't. So our working definition is civil discourse is conversation governed by the virtues of intellectual confidence and intellectual humility, expressing proper respect for ourselves and for those who differ from us. Again, understanding the purpose of higher education to be knowledge discovery, knowledge invention, and knowledge transmission, but since we're all, epistemically limited, we have to learn from each other and teach to each other. This sort of captures that. Just to flesh out a little bit what we mean by confidence and humility in this context. Confidence is acknowledging that although we are epistemically limited in terms of knowing, there's things we don't know and there's things we think we know and we're wrong about, but we're not always wrong. We are often informed and correct, and owning that is kind of an act of confidence. Then expressing our own opinions, even when they differ from others, would be confidence. Being able and willing to support our positions with reasons, as opposed to just mere assertions, is also an act of intellectual confidence. And this list could go on. Just wanted to give you a few things to think about. Humility, sort of dear to my heart, acknowledging that we might be uninformed or mistaken. That there's lots of things we don't know, there's lots of things we think we know, and we don't. Then in turn, taking the time to understand what someone is saying before we attempt to formulate a response to it. Right? Really sort of in a space of genuine openness and curiosity, understand what somebody else is saying, and then being willing to change our mind when appropriate. I would encourage you to sort of bear these things in mind for the next however long, hour and a half.
And so the goal of this forum tonight really is to look at not necessarily the topic, but to think about the way these professionals discourse. And that's, I'll remind people that open-mindedness and listening skills are very closely related. Try not to develop a defense in your mind as a person is speaking, actually listening to what they say. And I think that's something that we talk quite a bit. It's a very difficult human thing to do because we're naturally going to put our fists up. So we pulled together a very interesting panel on this topic, and I want to introduce these people as we go, and I would say you could raise your hand in the audience so they know who you are. First, Paul Ehlers. Paul is a lifelong resident of Wisconsin, earned a BS from UW-SP and an MA in geography from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He's currently employed as a geography, geology, GIS instructor at Nicolay Area Technical College in Rhineland. He's been a capital L, this is from him now, a capital L libertarian since the 1980s and is currently chair of the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin. Next to him is Jim Maas. Jim is a former employee of this institution. He's a retired staff member of the University Library. He was a media lab supervisor there. He has a BS from this institution and an education major with an emphasis in broad-field social studies. He has a master's degree from UW-Stout in audiovisual communications, and he's a former libertarian candidate for the Wisconsin Assembly. In the center, we have Don Downs. Don is the Alexander, I want to be sure I say this right, Mickelson Professor of Political Science, Law, Journalism, and Journalism at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His degrees include a BA from Cornell University, an MA from the University of Illinois, and a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. His teaching and research are in the areas of law, politics, sociology, criminal law and justice, free speech, civil liberties, constitutional law, jurisprudence, American politics, and I assume maybe climate change in there as well. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But having said that, we want to welcome Don as our constitutional civil liberties expert. On the other side there, we have Bobbi Bradley, who is the Center Research Administrator for the Marshfield Clinic Research Foundation's Epidemiology Research Center. Prior to joining MCF, Bobbi was the public health planner for Portage County, Wisconsin, and health educator for the Great Minds Health Center in Potosi, Missouri. She received a bachelor's degree in health promotion from UW-Stevens Point in 2004 and a master of public health from UW-La Crosse in 2010. And next to her is Ed Belongia. I think I said it right. It's not Italian, apparently. I was corrected at dinner. He received his degrees from University of Michigan. He's also got an MD from Michigan State University. He completed an internal medicine residency at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He completed a fellowship in epidemiology with the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention and is engaged in full-time research now His research areas include vaccine safety and vaccine effectiveness. Please welcome this distinguished forum to UW-Madison. So, the format, just how are we going to have this discussion, civil discourse tonight? We have 2 case studies that are in your program, and you can read those at your leisure. We are going to read them out loud again in a few minutes. But basically, we're going to give the Libertarian Party side here 5 minutes. We're going to give the public health side 5 minutes, and we're going to give Don, as a constitutional interpreter, we think, 5 minutes, and then we're going to open it for 15-minute discussion, something of a free-for-all that we're kind of worried about, actually. I think it'll be fun. And I'm going to do the same thing for case study number 2. And at the end of this, you're going to get a chance to use those little clickers, and we'll talk to you more about that as we go. So, having said that, we ask you, we hope that you keep on point here, and I'm going to read the first case study to get us started. And this is in your program, I want to read along with you. Case study number 1, parents who distrust the science behind vaccinations. State Senator Jones has been contacted by a number of school superintendents who are troubled by an increase in the number of families obtaining personal conviction vaccine waivers. Many of these parents, according to the superintendents, are misinformed about the science behind vaccinations, and as one superintendent expressed, when it comes to the health of our children and community, we have an ethical responsibility to moderate the impact of convictions that are falsified by the best evidence available to us. In response to these concerns, Senator Jones has authored a bill modeled on Oregon's school immunization law, according to which parents who request a vaccination waiver for reasons of religion or personal conviction must provide the school with 1, a signed letter from a healthcare practitioner confirming that they have discussed the risks and benefits of vaccinations, or 2, a certificate verifying that they have completed an online lesson about the risks and benefits of vaccinations. Pat Smith, who is running against Jones in the upcoming election, notes that many parents are skeptical about the objectivity of conventional medicine and see the U.S. Centers for Disease Control as the public relations arm of the vaccine industry. Jones' bill, Smith charges, inappropriately requires parents who oppose vaccinations to subject themselves to state-sanctioned attempts at re-education before they can provide their children with one of the basic public services to which they have a right as taxpayers. A voter in Jones and Smith's voting district is confused about the merits of Jones' bill and Smith's objections and has turned to you for clarification. What do you say? And at this point, we'd like to ask the Libertarian side of this conversation, and we're going to give you 5 minutes.
Okay, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
Obviously, we haven't rehearsed this yet. Yes, you go first and then hand it over to me.
Okay, well, the first thing that jumps out at me is they say they have an ethical responsibility to mitigate some of this disinformation or this incorrect information. And I would agree with that. And how we do that, I think, is education is always the answer. I don't know that legislation really changes people's fundamental core values, and it sometimes has a blowback and entrenches people in the opposite direction. So, as a libertarian, we believe in very limited government. And I would agree. I have not heard what the doctors have to say, but I would agree that it's a good idea to get your kids immunized. I got my kids immunized, but I would stop short at this mandatory forcing of immunization. Speaking about defining your terms, libertarians define government as force. Okay? And I believe personally that you should use force as little as possible. Therefore, you should use government as little as possible. I'm also very concerned about, do the ends justify the means? Because we have had all kinds of nonsense occur in the world under that mantra that the ends justify the means. I would argue that the ends are the means, and we would encourage people to get immunized. We would educate them. I would probably stop short at the mandatory check off from the doctor type of a thing, or from, that they sit and they watch a video, and it's not an outrageous request, but I suspect it really won't do much good, won't change any minds. And I guess that's what I was thinking about, and you were thinking about, like, how effective are they and things like that, and dangers?
Well, the first thing that struck me is this is a question about distrust. And it looks like the distrust is from the government, the legislator and the school administrators. They distrust the people. And they don't think they should moderate the impact of their personal convictions. Well, that's kind of a scary thing, to leave that up to the government to moderate personal convictions. And so that strikes me